Well, it's 301 days until Christmas, and exactly 0 days since there's been outrage in the Star Wars community. So I thought tonight we would talk about some of the topics that are current today, things that folks are talking about, and get ready for tomorrow. We had another episode of the Clone Wars, the animated series, season 7, should come on tomorrow morning, and we can have that to look forward to. So rather than just be upset or down or ambivalent about the future of Star Wars, we've got new content coming out in Disney Plus every week, at least for a while. So I know that one of the major topics has been around this announcement following the Project Luminous and the High Republic. And I just wanted to go through some of the things that I've been hearing, some of the things that folks are talking about, and kind of give my own perspective on it. I think there are some folks that are a little too reactionary, and that's probably on both sides of the fence there. So we'll just try to look at it from a fair and balanced perspective, kind of following the tenets of the Gray Order, but also just I'm a fan of Star Wars. So Santa enjoys Star Wars. I enjoy getting new content, and so I thought, well, let's talk about some of these things. So let me bring up here one of the first things that is a item of discussion, and it's this whiteboard. The whiteboard notes that people, or this looks like actually a paper, but these are from a brainstorming session. It was released during that announcement on the Project Luminous, and there's been a lot of chat and discussion about the diversity and representation that appears on here. From my own perspective, and having participated in brainstorming sessions before, the way these work, people bring up ideas, and sort of the ground rules of a brainstorming session is nothing's off the table. So for example, if we were to have a brainstorming session about building a car, somebody might put up, say, hey, what are the things we need to consider building a new car? Somebody might say, well, we need to talk about the engine. You put the engine up there. You need to talk about the wheels. What size tires are we going to have on it? And you put the tires up there. And that's not to say that, well, hey, idiot, of course you're going to have an engine and tires because you're building a car. So what I've heard some people complain about with this brainstorming session here, these items, is that who are these people that they don't know Star Wars and they've got to put some of these things up here? Of course, you're going to have Jedi, you're going to have Force. What were they thinking? Well, when you're brainstorming, that's what happens. You put those things up. So you see the 3 columns that they kind of came up with. They wanted to, we had writers involved here. So we're obviously talking about fiction. We're talking about Star Wars. And then we've got the 3rd column over there on wishes, right? So under fiction, what are some things we need to talk about under fiction? And these are the items that the people in the room had to discuss. So they mentioned, of course, with Star Wars, authenticity, right? Needs to be authentically lived in. And these are the experienced writers. We have some big names in the room talking about the collaborative effort, and they wanted to make sure that we don't forget that it's authentically lived in. The second is surprise. We don't want to keep rehashing the same stories over and over. We want to bring something new. That personally excites me. The third one on here is the one that gets most of the attention in the discussions. It's this diversity. And from my own perspective, I don't like forced diversity any more than anybody else. But I also don't mind diversity. I don't, I'm not particularly sideways about uh, the stormtrooper who had left the First Order was Finn, and that was portrayed by a black actor. That doesn't bother me in the least, right? I'm not upset that why didn't we get a white guy, and I don't think most people are. But I've talked to people who have expressed that sentiment, and so I know that yeah, there's some crappy people out there, and I also know that there are people who want diverse roles just for the sake of numbers. So um, forced diversity is a bad thing, in my opinion. It should just be uh, good actors, right? Good characters, and whatever race or whatever gender or whatever species when the Star Wars universe is concerned, or even if it's a droid, right? Those things should all be character driven. And you want to have diversity. You want to make sure that you're representing all kinds of different species and races. So diversity's in here. Have an actual ending. I think this is interesting. It's somebody just put that up there as an idea that they thought it should have an actual ending rather than being open-ended. If you go back to uh, some of the novels that I've read leading up to the sequel trilogy, one of the biggest ones that of note was the Aftermath series, those 3 books. Well, at the end of those 3, it was a little open-ended. There wasn't an actual ending per se. So I find it interesting that across all these genres, all the different authors and books that are getting created, that they want to have an actual ending that ties it up. Feelings, they want to make sure that it's emotional. It's not just action. The next, relatable characters, that goes in with the diversity aspect. You want to have good characters of all different types. It doesn't bother me. The next, sweeping and epic, they don't want to be narrow focused. And then humor. uh, so those are just ideas. Again, those aren't like, these are bullet points that the authors have to meet. This is during a brainstorming session, and people are coming up with ideas, and they're just putting them on the board. Now, how many of these actually went through, and how did they get fleshed out? How did they get developed? What were the meat and potatoes that got put in with these? We don't know. This is just a screen capture from a thing where they were in a brainstorming session, and these things came up. That was great. Sir Nerd a Lot, hey, welcome. It's good to see you here. Thank you. Yeah, an actual ending's an awesome sign. I agree. Um, the second column on here starts with not pro-war. And I've heard people complain like, this is Star Wars. Of course, it's got war in the name of it. Don't you know what you're talking about? Well, there's a difference between pro-war and war. If you've watched the Clone Wars series at all, they've been developing these clones as individuals. They're not automatons, right? They have aspirations. They've got feelings. They've got emotion. They've got personality. And through that, they start challenging, like, what is this about? What are our lives about? And as you get involved in those lives, you realize that war has a cost. And being not pro-war means that where there's a solution that doesn't involve combat, that you would pursue it. You can look up the definition online. You can see not something that's not pro-war is something that, or somebody that is pro-war, to look at it the other way, looks to military solutions over diplomatic solutions. And I think the Star Wars has always kind of led with the diplomatic, but there was always this war going on. So I have no problem at all with being not pro-war, being that we don't solve everything with a blaster or lightsaber. Droids, again, that's just, you're thinking. This is brainstorming. Scope. I've seen people ask me, what is a scope? Well, it's not something that's on a rifle for looking down downfield. It's not a mouthwash. Scope is what the story entails, right? What's the size of the story? What's the beginning, end? What's this? So when you talk about scope, where does it fit? What's the scope of the story? Um, it's it's not a thing. So that's cracked me up. I think people are just having fun with it. Some people are obviously just trolling, but some people were actually confused on what do they mean by scope. Well, they mean a story scope, of course. Mythic. So we're in a universe, and we're talking about science fiction. Um, uh, Mythic is just that it's got aspects of like mythology, mythological kind of settings, creatures, powers, those kind of things. Space and lightsaber battles. I've seen complaints of some of the uh, episodes of the movies being too grounded, not enough space battles, not enough lightsaber fights, and so they put it up here. That means that they're hearing people, right? They hear that people are complaining about, oh, this didn't have enough space battle in it. It's Star Wars. It should be taking place out in space, or we didn't have any lightsaber battles in that. So that's a common complaint of The Last Jedi, is we didn't hit a true lightsaber duel. Well, this means they're listening, right? They hear that kind of feedback. That's a good thing too. The next, no single or main character. That's because we've got different authors coming to you. Now, each of them may have a main character, or means character story arc, but they're not all beholden to the same one. So there's no problem with that. The Force, again, that's just brainstorming. It's like the analogy of the car I gave earlier. You say, well, our car needs to have tires. Well, Star Wars needs to involve the Force, so you would. Complicated monsters. This reminds me of the Zillow Beast, actually. If you've watched the Clone Wars, the Zillow Beast was a last of his species, or the last known of the species, and was an intelligent being. It was also nearly indestructible and caused great havoc and destruction, but it was a complicated monster. So when I think about complicated monster, I think of the Zillow Beast from the Clone Wars. The last column, the High Republic. These are their wishes, right? So as they were thinking about things, again, it's a brainstorming session, folks. They brought up this idea of the High Republic, and I'm sure there was discussion where it went and how they defined it. Took place from there. Relic hunters. I heard somebody put this like an Indiana Jones kind of thing, right? There's a MacGuffin. There's something that they're after. That's fine. University. This was the idea of, I wasn't in the room, but when I see university, it's like the Jedi Academy. An academy, it could be a school. This is a university, so it'd be like a higher learning. So if you've got younglings and Padawan who are going to the academy, so grade school, high school, that kind of idea, they're thinking, well, what about a university for advanced studies in a particular area of Jedi studies? Dinosaurs, that's gotten a lot of criticism. I think it goes with the monsters. Of course, you're not going to get a T-Rex. You're not going to get, a Velociraptor. They're, just somebody's having fun. They're brainstorming. They put it up there. I don't think we're going to see like dinosaurs from Earth history or archaeology in Star Wars. Again, representation and diversity shows up. It's got people all sideways about, this Lucasfilm forcing diversity. Is this forced diversity? Is somebody, pushing an agenda? Let's let the story come to us. Let's find out how it goes. Again, I'm as opposed to forced diversity as anybody, but if you've got natural characters, well-written characters, which you would trust that these writers, these authors that we have involved in Project Luminous, that they would be. uh, they're capable, right? These are capable authors, capable of creating good characters of different diverse backgrounds, different representation, different, again, species, different genders, different races. That's all good. Arthurian legend. So Knights of the Round Table, we heard him mention that. That's good. Um, Jedi Knights. We'll see where it goes. Um, let's see, what's it have on here? Rival houses. That reminds me of like a Harry Potter situation. And I'll actually drop down to the very last one on there. So you got rival houses, and you've also got splinter group force users. One thing that I've always wondered about is what happens to force sensitives that leave the Jedi Order. Certainly, they don't stop using the Force just because they left the Order. They're not pursuing their training any further, but some of these people were fully trained Jedi when they walked away. Think about Ahsoka, how advanced she was by the time she walked away. This happened at all stages during a Jedi's life, and when they walk away from the Order, where do they go? Here we've got splinter group force users, people who said, I'm not in. The Jedi Order has things in it that I just can't abide by. I'm going to go off on my own, and you have splinter groups. The same thing happened within Christianity. You get different churches come off from the Protestant Reformation, and then all the different kind of denominations and church groups that split off following. So of course you're going to have splinter group force users, and the idea of having rival houses I find interesting. It's like a Harry Potter idea, right? Who knows where it'll go, or even if they'll do it, right? Because again, this is a brainstorming session. Just because it's on the list doesn't mean you're going to see it. Like dinosaurs, I don't think you're going to see them. The next is the Sith Empire, and I know, folks, right? We have already established in canon that prior to the Clone Wars, there were generations, right? 1,000 generations of peace, and the Sith were thought to be largely extinct, right? I don't think that most reasonable people think that there were no Sith. And when we see Exegol in The Rise of Skywalker and these thousands of Sith worshippers or followers, they're not necessarily Sith masters or Force users. They're followers of that Sith. So the Sith Empire. It's an idea they put up there. They're going to have to flesh out. Where is the Sith? To what extent do they exist? Where do they exist? How many are there? When you're brainstorming, you put it up there and then you flesh it out later. The next, chaos agents. So people just throw a wrench in the plan. So those are the things that were on that whiteboard, things that folks have been talking about the last couple of days. And I just thought I would go through and look at it from a little different perspective, bring in some discussion about what a brainstorming session is. How do those things work, and why would something show up on the board that's so obvious? Oh, Sir Nerdala, a Game of Thrones houses. Well, yeah, those are different houses as well. So good point. Rival houses. If it's a Game of Thrones kind of thing, then those are more tied to kingdoms or fiefdoms, right? So absolutely, those could be Game of Thrones type houses. Again, when you put up their rival houses, that discussion can go a multitude of directions. It's not to say that there are going to be rival houses, and those rival houses are going to be Hufflepuff and Gryffindor, right? No, come on. They're going to come up with their own Star Wars version, and maybe a Game of Thrones type thing, especially when you've got a High Republic and they're kind of exploring, and you've got, you think about like Hut Space, for example. If that were more organized, you could think of that as being a rival house to another, let's say the pirates, right? The pirates that are out there with like Hondo. Maybe you've got rivals between the Huts and the pirates, that kind of idea. Speaking of pirates, in that preview, they talked about Vikings. Well, Vikings also had houses to go along with Sir Nerdalot there, right? The Viking clans, Viking houses could be very well the same as well. So those are some thoughts. The other thing that I saw some concern about was that the scope of this thing is like 200 years before the beginning of the Clone Wars, the Skywalker saga, and that seems an awful compressed time, and there's not a lot of time to work with, and and I just challenged that a little bit. Let's take a look at our own history, like 200 years ago, from 2020, 1820, and I just looked up a couple of things just to see, like the electric light bulb had not even been invented in 1820. So think about the electric light bulb. We've already gone past incandescent bulbs and past, now we're at LED. We've gone through different iterations of honing that technology over the centuries. So 200 years is a long time. Cars had not been invented. The internal combustion engine didn't exist. If you're talking about steam powered engines, didn't even really weren't pervasive at that time. So 1820 is a long time ago, folks. The last one I think is interesting is that the Republican Party in the United States had not even been founded in 1820. And so the President of the United States today is a member of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has control of the U.S. Senate, and it's a major, right? We have two parties in the U.S. Today. Well, in 1820, the Republican Party wasn't one of them. Didn't even exist. It had not been founded. So 200 years is a long time when you think about the High Republic. For political orders to come about, for different folks to align and establish their own political parties, that's a plenty of time. We've got 200 years to play with. I'm not concerned. So as far as the whiteboard, and as far as the time compression, look, I trust that these writers are competent. I trust that they are able to come up with compelling characters, compelling stories. The books that I've read that they've put out, the ones that are listed with Project Luminous, they're good writers. So I think we should just calm down a little bit and let's see how it plays out. And we can criticize each of the books or comics or stories as they come out if they warrant. But let's wait and see. The other aspect, I talked about this a little bit the other night, is prior to around 2000, I was not a consumer of Star Wars novels. I'd been, I was a young guy when the initial movie came out, Star Wars, now known as A New Hope. That's the first movie I remember going to see at the theater as a kid. So from 1970s until 2000, I had not read any Star Wars novels. And since then, I've read almost 30. So it's, I understand when folks say, well, this is about novels. I don't really consume that kind of work. And they're disappointed because the Project Luminous, all this noise, all this announcement and excitement and buildup led to something that they're not engaged with. And that's a fair criticism. That's perfectly fine. Now, to counter that just a little bit, and I'm not going to argue with anybody that's upset with it, but it was announced all the way back at Celebration that this was a writing initiative, that these were going to be books and that kind of thing. So, to be fair, it was set up to be books and it was delivered as books. People that had kind of got their hopes up about movies or whatnot and we're disappointed. I think we're just kind of led up with the excitement that came about, and then when it didn't happen, they in the way that they wanted themselves to see it, it kind of let them down. So okay, but let's hope that out of these, some of these characters and some of these stories will be compelling enough to warrant some movies. And I think we've had some discussion. Josh with the Den of Nerds has brought up a few times, like how the Marvel Cinematic Universe builds. They have individual character and storylines, be it uh, all Captain America or Spider-Man or Iron Man, right? All these stories then built up to the Avengers, and then the Avengers built up into what we get with Endgame. So those things kind of grow, and so hopefully what we'll see here is with the High Republic, these stories that these great authors come up with will have compelling characters, compelling stories, and they'll warrant us to get some content in other medium, be it streaming and hopefully in theatrical releases of some really good stuff. So that's just some thoughts around that. There's a couple other things that I thought, well, this would be fun to show. One was the pictures with the High Republic here, and there's this lineup of Jedi, and again, I'm not blind to the representation of the like rainbow kind of color evolution going across there. Right, I get that. I see what's going on, but at the same time, there's some interesting things in here, and I draw you all the way over to the left-hand side. We see a saber with a single hilt. It doesn't appear to be a split hilt when you look at the two white blades coming up out of it. It appears to be a single hilt with two blades, like a tuning fork almost. Interesting. The character holding it also has like primarily a white robe, and maybe you can see the white saber kind of reflecting on their face. Appears to be female. I'm not exactly sure. It may not be. It could be a different race. Hard to say. But so you've got that on that side. Go all the way over to the very right hand side, and those of us that are familiar with the Mandalorian episodes in the Clone Wars and Rebels, and the dark saber. This looks very much like the dark saber, but it's not the dark saber, right? Yeah, so Nerdalot, it looks like a dark saber. That's pretty cool. I mean, I guess it would make sense that the kyber crystal that created the dark saber has a different kind of shape to it, right? It's more of a blade. This is more of a saber. So in this case, we've got what looks like a lightsaber. It's just with that dark saber kind of kyber crystal. And see, the character holding it is wearing opposite robes, right? Very dark gray robes, dark skinned, dark complexioned. It looks like whited out eyes. I can't really tell. But look at the bottom half of that saber as well. Like, so the dark saber comes down. It's got some ornate kind of things right there, and you see the character's left hand, and then their right hand, and then there's this big pommel that comes down on the bottom half. Pretty cool. That's a pretty cool hilt, right? I like that. So that's cool. Then just working from that dark saber over, we've got a bit of a purplish kind of blade here, held by this this guy here. Yeah, yeah, I agree. The picture is rad. Absolutely. And we've seen this species. We saw or a similar species. They're typically the bounty hunter. I can't remember his name right now. It'll come to me. But kind of a bad guy. But and then in the Mandalorian, He ran into a couple. It's a similar species, but here with a Jedi blade. Look here with the next two we've got are similar to Maul, right? They've got the horns. They're Zabrak, right? Is that a, is that a Loth wolf? Yes, that's a Loth wolf, dude. I was thinking that it was a. I wasn't even looking yet. I was working right to left, but yeah, that's a Loth wolf there. Good. So yeah, we got a couple Zabrak here, and then this bald dude in the middle. It reminds me of the old Kung Fu guy. If you were old enough to remember that television series, Kung Fu, reminds me of like a Shaolin monk, right? Double green saber. We've got the character here in the middle, looks like a male with a blue saber, and then we've got a yellow saber. This guy here, he's tossing his hilt. It's not lit, right? And then another darker kind of colored with a purple saber. So and then that Loth wolf. That's cool. That's really good. I didn't pick up on the Loth wolf, but that's pretty neat. And then there's this other picture that's been kind of the head of a lot of things. And of course, you get this Wookiee. And one thing that's been noted is that this Wookiee has a cross guard on his lightsaber. I've heard some people say that, well, a cross guard on a lightsaber, that's kind of pointless. Except there are some metals, they're rare and they're quite expensive, some metals that are resistant to lightsaber. So it's very possible that this cross guard on this Wookiee's lightsaber is made of that kind of metal, which would be kind of nice. Keep your hands from getting hit. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about this space station. In the video, you can see this spire on the top of this space station. Looks like the one that's in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. That middle spire of that Jedi Temple. My belief is that this space station is a Jedi Temple of sorts, and that's something else that I think we might get a good bit of in the High Republic. We might get a good bit of other Jedi Temple involved. We've only seen a couple, and you hear talk of different temples here or there. You see some in the Clone Wars. So anyway, those are some of the things that have been on my mind. I'm excited about getting another episode of the Clone Wars tonight. It's episode 2 of the Echo the Echo 4-part story there. Dale, hey, good to see you, man. And Mrs. Claus, if you heard the alarm just a second ago, Mrs. Claus is coming in the house here. We're going to have a late dinner, 9:30 Eastern. So, look, I've enjoyed this half hour, kind of going through things, and appreciate you guys coming in and chatting with me. And one of the things that I've mentioned, I'll bring up again, is we've got Santa's mailbox right here over my shoulder. All right, this is like an actual stuff. This isn't like a wall picture, right? I can reach back here and I can open the mailbox. See, we got stuff in the mailbox. So this is real stuff. The tree up there's got sleigh going around the star up there at the top of the tree. This is my Santa's chair here. So I just say with that mailbox, if there's a topic that you'd like to discuss, and there's something that you would like me to answer, it could be about being Santa, or it could be about Star Wars, whatever it is you might want to know about me, or you'd like me to talk about. If you'll shoot me a message, I'll be happy to pull it out of the mailbox and we'll talk about it in a future stream. But until then, I think I'm going to wrap it up for the night. Again, I appreciate you all being here, and we'll try to come on tomorrow and uh, we'll try to pick up with uh, uh, a review of the Clone Wars episode that's coming out in the morning. And at some point, I'd like to bring up some fan fiction and talk about some ideas and some creativity folks have. So until then, you guys, may the force be with you. And as always, I say, ho, 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 Merry Christmas, everybody. Good night.